Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I don't know where you're watching from, but I just want to say welcome to my um, live video. All right, as many people who come in, we have an interesting topic to discuss. And I just want to ask you, if you have not subscribed to my channel, please do that. Click the subscription and also click on the notification bell so that you get notified whenever we come up with our content. Today we'll be looking at the flying donkey to heaven. It's like a question. The flying donkey to heaven, Al-Buraq, a Christian polemicist, myself, Young Asanga, I will be um, looking at this Islamic claim of Muhammad, um, traveling to heaven on the back of a winged beast. First, I believe that some of my viewers may know that the Islamic claim um, of Muhammad traveling from Mecca to Jerusalem, that is from Masjid Al-Haram to Masjid Al-Aqsa, that is the mosque in Mecca to the mosque in Jerusalem. Then from there, he ascended through the heavens on the wing of the Buraq. So I want to make this clear that this is not an attack on Islam. It is not an attack on Muslims. It is a respectful way of saying I'm not going to mock anybody. My channel is not for mockery. I'm not here to fight anybody, but I am here to try to gain clarity to most of these claims by the Muslims. As it is written in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, usually on my Apologetics show, I always clarify this, that we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age. So this sets the stage for a good spiritual critique, not a personal attack. First, let us get to know these words. What is Isra and Miraj? Isra and Miraj. The event is described in Islamic tradition as a two-part journey. The Isra, which was Muhammad traveling from Mecca to Jerusalem in one night, and the Miraj, which is Muhammad ascending through 7 heavens to meet the prophets. He met Musa, he met Isa, he met several prophets, and then he received the command for 5 daily prayers. Well, this is a cause for concern that Muhammad, with whom the Quran claims that Allah had been speaking or communicating with him, Allah sent angel Jibril to bring revelations to him, would need to travel that far through 7 heavens to get nothing else but just the times for prayers. I mean, it's a cause of concern. It's something for us to be concerned about. If Muhammad had the luxury of an angel coming from heaven to visit him every now and then and tell him and give him the Quran is considered by Muslims to be the highest miracle of the Islamic faith. The Quran is considered to be a wonder. So Allah needed to send angels to come and give the Quran piecemeal upon piecemeal to Muhammad. But when it came to receiving just the times of prayer, which would have also been communicated by the angel Jibril, the Quran or the Islamic tradition wants us to believe that Muhammad needed to travel all the way and he needed to be on the back of a winged donkey, first traveling thousands of miles from Mecca to Jerusalem, from Masjid Al-Aqsa to Masjid Al-Haram in Jerusalem before receiving the times of prayers, just the 5 times of prayers. All right, let's see Surah 17, Ayah 1. Surah Al-Isra, Ayah 1. Glory be to him who took his by night from the sacred mosque to the farthest mosque, the sacred mosque of Al-Aqsa to the sacred mosque of Al-Haram. This verse is vague. and does not mention Al-Buraq. This verse, the Quranic verse, does not mention Al-Buraq in any way. It doesn't mention the ascent to heaven or the heavenly meetings with the prophet or with Allah or with Musa or with Isa. This is just the only time it was mentioned that Allah took him from the farthest, from the sacred mosque, Al-Aqsa, to the farthest mosque, Al-Haram. Now, look at the Islamic source where Muslims seem to base this doctrine on. Sahih al-Bukhari 7517, Sahih al-Bukhari 7517, and Sahih Muslim 162. Look at here where the narrative comes. It says Muhammad is riding Al-Buraq. Muhammad is also meeting Adam. Muhammad is meeting Moses. Muhammad is meeting Jesus and others. And then Muhammad bargains with Allah over the number of daily prayers. So for the Muslim, they hold on to this belief not because the Quran said so. The Quran only mentioned that Allah took his servant from the sacred mosque to the farthest mosque, period. No mention of Al-Buraq, no mention of the meetings that he had and the prayer times. All right? Quran gives no detailed account. The story relies heavily on hadith, which are not universally accepted and were compiled long after Muhammad's death. They are usually not universally accepted. In fact, I know of a certain Islamic apologist, a woman on Facebook. Her name is Chikakati. She does not subscribe to the use of the hadiths by Muslims. She believes that hadiths are written by mere humans who don't have the authority to stand on behalf of Muhammad. And she keeps arguing that Muhammad never asked them to write stories about his life. Of course, we know that the hadiths were written over 200 years after the prophet had passed on. So let's consider some of these logical and historical challenges regarding this story that is given to us not by the Quran but by the Hadith, Sahih Muslim and Sahih Al-Bukhari. First, physical impossibility. Traveling 1,200 kilometers, first traveling. I mean, the question is, why wouldn't Allah just pick him from where he is and let him move? Why did he need to travel from Masjid Al-Aqsa to Masjid Al-Haram? What did he go there to do? Silent, quiet, there was nothing. So why would he need to travel that far? 1,200 kilometers and then ascending through 7 heavens in one night. This defies natural law. Remember that it wasn't said that he did it in a spiritual form. Rather, it is postulated that he actually went there in his physical form with a physical Buraq. Islamic scholars debate whether it is a physical or spiritual journey, but the hadith describes physical elements. For instance, the Al-Buraq, the gates of heaven, the physical meetings. That is what the hadith describes. Number 2, reliability of the hadith. First, since we have established that it is physically impossible to travel that way, that far, we also want to look at the hadith. Is it reliable? Is it where Muslims should base their 5 prayer times tradition upon? Hadith collections like Bukhari and Muslim were compiled 200 years after Muhammad. So contradictions also exist between hadiths on the same event. Would God base a foundational religious practice like the daily prayers on a story not clearly revealed in his primary scripture? This is what we should ask. The Quran doesn't tell us about all that. So there is no mention of 5 daily prayers in the Quran at all. But then the Muslims believe in it, they practice it. So it means their faith is based upon the hadith, because it is the hadith that talks about how Muhammad went and received the first 50 prayer times, and then he came back and Moses said to him, no, that's too much for you. You have to go back and negotiate with Allah. So he came up, he kept on going back and forth in heaven before he finally got it. I mean, the story is, well, I don't want to say anything. Let's look at it. Would God base it? It's a matter of us asking ourselves this question. Would God base such foundational religious practice upon just the story of men, not upon the Quran. Why is it absent in the Quran? And then we have it. So you will see Surah 2, Ayah 3 to 4 praises those who believe in the unseen and follow the revelation. Yet the Miraj is not part of the Quranic revelation in detail. So if you see Surah 2, Surah Al-Baqarah, Ayah 3 to 4, it actually praises those who believe in the unseen and follow the revelation, which is the Quran. So the Miraj and is not part of the Quranic revelation. Why do Muslims believe in it? Why would they believe in something that is not revealed? Let's look at biblical visions of heaven. Because Muslims will say, hey, what about what happened in the Bible? Oh, some people might say, what about Jesus that you claim ascended into heaven? Of course, Muslims don't believe Jesus ascended into heaven. Of course, they don't even believe Jesus died on the cross, but we do. So let's see Isaiah chapter 6. Isaiah sees the Lord seated on a throne, surrounded by seraphim, a vision of holiness and awe. He didn't say that he went there. Revelations 4 to 5, John sees the throne of God, the Lamb, and heavenly worship. No bargaining, no mythical beast. Heaven is not a place you just go and sit down and start bargaining. Biblical prophets respond with reverence and humility, not negotiation. Muhammad's bargaining with Allah from 50 prayer down to 5 resembles human reasoning, not divine decree. So if you look at what happened in the Bible when the prophets had the opportunity to see a vision of heaven, you will discover that there was no bargaining there. There was no bargaining whatsoever. Rather, what they had was a time of reverence, a time of awe, where they worship God. But in the case of Muhammad, what we are made to believe is that he had the privilege of going to bargain with God about the times that God gave. So it postulates here that God didn't know what he did. He just gave 50 prayer times, and then Muhammad went back and forth negotiating. Something that can be done on earth if that is true. Again, James 1:17, every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of light, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. God's commands are not subject to negotiations. God's commands are not subject to negotiation because God is perfect. So for what the Muslims are trying to show to us here is that God is not perfect in his ways. So if God actually willed 50 prayer times for the Muslims, Muhammad needed to go and make God change his mind. Muhammad needed to go and negotiate. And this is what the Muslims claim, that God is sovereign. God is almighty. How can the Almighty give 50 prayer times and Muhammad had to negotiate it? I'm asking this so that the Muslims can think. So let's look at this challenge. 2 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 5 tells us that we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. The story of Isra and Mi, while revered by Muslims, lacks scriptural clarity, historical reliability, and theological coherence. It lacks it. So while Muslims revere this story, it lacks all these components, these elements. It lacks scriptural clarity because it is not there in the Quran. It lacks historical reliability. We can't find such historical evidence about that. And theological coherence. It is not consistent with the attitude of God and the nature of God. So can a story that depends on late traditions, includes mythical elements, and contradicts biblical revelation be from the true God? It is a question for the Muslims and everyone. Can we rely on this? Can we depend on these traditions, which includes mythical elements like the flying donkey and contradicts biblical revelations? Can it be from God? I think no. My answer is no. So, to the Muslim listeners, to my Muslim viewers, respect your devotion and sincerity. I do respect them, all right? But I'm also inviting you to examine the gospel, not a religion of rituals, but a relationship with the living God. I keep saying this. I said this in my former video. So John 14 verse 6 says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes except through me. Jesus offers direct access to heaven, not through mythical beasts, but through the cross. I think the Muslims actually borrowed this story from Jesus entering into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey. But, well, Jesus didn't have to fly a donkey. He rode on a donkey, and people saw him. In the case of Jesus going to Jerusalem, people saw him. People sang Hosanna to him. There are evidences about that. You can verify it. There was an owner of the donkey. Somebody owned it. Jesus said, go meet that person and ask and say, the master has need of it. But in the case of Muhammad's story, no evidence whatsoever. Just Muhammad and the donkey. Muslims need to ponder on this. So let's look at some of the key points about this discussion, this argument. One, the Quran is vague on the story of the Miraj. The Quran never mentioned about flying on the back of a donkey, about ascending into heaven, about meeting with Moses and God. It never mentioned it. Two, hadiths are unreliable. Even the Muslim world is divided upon it, that they don't consider the hadith as authoritative. All right? Logically and theologically, there are contradictions about this. Biblical clarity and truth have been distorted with regards to this postulation by Muslims. So I encourage respectful dialogue between Muslims and Christians on this, and that Muslims should also go further to study. It is not enough to argue blindly. Of course, if the Quran cannot be criticized, if the Quran cannot subject itself to be questioned, then there is something wrong with the Quran. Then that leaves the Bible to be the authentic word of God. Because truth does not fear criticism. Truth does not fear criticism. That is why I keep telling people that the Bible is the most criticized book on earth. The Bible is the most criticized book on earth, yet it survives. So what is the Quran afraid of? Why should the Quran not be criticized? Why should the Quran not be questioned? This is what the Muslim need to go back and do. Question your Quran and ask questions. Meet the Christians to give clarity on some areas, in as much as the Quran said it came to confirm the previous revelations. So consult those who have the previous revelations. The Christians, they have the Torah, the Zabur, and the Injil. Meet them and let them give you clarity on some of these issues that seem to be contradictions in the Quran. Now I'm going to say this in Romans chapter 1, verse